The Voxcaster crackles at 0400 Imperial Standard, cutting through the perpetual twilight of Hive Tertius's manufactorum depths. Worker 7741 Kappa kneels on yellow stencil marks, her position in Devotional Bay 7 unchanged for 6 years, 2 months, 18 days. Prayer beads click between cracked fingers, cog teeth salvaged from broken servitors, worn smooth by countless recitations. Her lips move with mechanical precision through the litany of toil while her eyes hold the vacant distance of exhaustion. This is imperial faith as industrial process, measured, monitored, managed. Supervisor Hecht stands at the devotional podium, red robes marking dual authority as foreman and lay confessor under the Ministorum Administratum Efficiency Concordat. His servo skull hovers at shoulder height, crimson optics scanning 347 kneeling workers, recording attendance through retinal identification while monitoring vocal participation levels. The device's recording rune blinks steady green, compliance achieved, productivity maintained, souls accounted for, in weekly reports that flow upward through channels none of these workers will ever see. The assembly intones familiar words. Blessed is the work of faithful hands. Sacred is the labor that serves the throne. But something shifts in the 7th verse. Voices drift slightly off tempo, transforming labor sanctifies the flesh into labor without witness sanctifies. The change is subtle, barely perceptible, but Hecht's augmetic eye whirs as it refocuses. The servo skull's rune flickers amber. Worker 7741 Kappa notices, because she has been listening more carefully lately, passing familiar liturgy for meaning that might explain why her prayers feel increasingly hollow. Beyond reinforced windows, the manufactorum floor stretches into darkness, punctuated by plasma cutter flares and servitor rhythms. Prometheum drums move along conveyors, each bearing standard imperial aquilas alongside quality markings. Most show regulation, 2-dot verification stamps, but an increasing number display 3 dots arranged in subtle, triangular patterns. The anomaly first caught her attention 2 weeks ago, 47 3-dot drums in a production run that should have contained none according to posted protocols. The ecclesiarchy functions as spiritual quality control in this war economy with a church's skin. Attendance becomes levy, confession becomes report, devotion becomes metric. It works until pressure builds and scarcity bites deeper. When blessings arrive stapled to ration chits, worship transforms into transaction. Transactions invite renegotiation by desperate minds seeking meaning in grinding routine. As the devotional concludes, workers kiss Aquila medallions that serve as identification tags and monitoring devices. Conversations fragment through the dispersing crowd. Jorik, the aging dock supervisor, mentions Brother Angel's 3-week absence from evening devotions. When pressed, he explains the lay preacher received penitential reassignment to serve the emperor's will in ways requiring no explanation to mere laborers. The phrase settles uneasily in minds already questioning whether their faith reaches higher than recycled air systems. At Assembly Station Kappa 7, worker 7741 Kappa installs Prometheum flow regulators into ammunition feeding systems destined for guard regiments whose names remain classified above her clearance. Her hands move with practiced efficiency while thoughts return to Brother Angel's absence, to 3-dot markings, to hymn 847 appearing in dreams with lyrics that don't match official hymn books. By the 6th hour, wrongness crystallizes into certainty. The Emperor's light feels dimmed in depths where his servants toil without witness. During mandated nutrition break, she stands beside Kellen, a junior clerk from the Administratum Liaison Office. His pale skin and soft hands mark him as someone who works with data rather than metal. They have shared perhaps 12 words in the past year, but something in his expression suggests similar doubts. The question forms itself before wisdom can intervene, dangerous in its simplicity, heretical in its implication. The stale air hangs heavy with metallic tang and ozone. Servo skulls drift overhead, lenses clicking as they count compliance. In this place where faith has become industrial function, where devotion flows through quotas and metrics, where the Imperium's own habits, ritual, ration, fear, create the very conditions that heresy exploits, one worker asks her shift mate the question that changes everything. "Do you think the Emperor actually hears us down here?" The words hang between them in recycled air, waiting for an answer that will determine whether faith endures or transforms into something else entirely. Kellen's response arrives not in words, but through shared recognition during the next morning's devotions. When Supervisor Hecht announces revised productivity quotas, the clerk's eyes meet worker 7741 Kappas across the devotional bay, carrying the same hollow understanding that questions, once spoken, create their own gravity. The dangerous inquiry about divine attention lingers between them, drawing similar doubts from the exhausted minds of others who have begun parsing familiar liturgy for meaning that might explain why their prayers feel increasingly transactional. The material architecture of their existence provides fertile ground for spiritual erosion, tithe, grade, exactis. Median protocols govern every aspect of life in Hive Tertius's lower sectors with industrial precision. 12-hour shifts with 4.5 hours sanctioned rest create rhythms that grind flesh and spirit equally. Protein substitute arrives on alternating weeks, genuine nutrition reserved for higher-tier workers whose productivity scores justify real food. Elcho's stick permits tie directly to output metrics through heat-sensitive chits, whose ink darkens with performance ratings, transforming even minor relief into earned privilege rather than basic comfort. The ecclesiarchy functions as both spiritual shepherd and compliance monitor. Under-efficiency mandates that blur pastoral care with surveillance. Confession data flows automatically to administratum levi assessors through servo skull networks, creating oversight wrapped in the language of soul tending. Missing devotions trigger productivity reviews. Excessive penance requests indicate psychological instability requiring corrective intervention. Faith becomes another industrial input, measured and managed like Prometheum flow rates, or the 3-dot quality stamps that appear with increasing frequency on drums moving through the docks. Marta Corvain embodies the first failure mode, unanswered prayer, transforming devotion into bitter transaction. Her son, shipped out with the 47th Tertius, mechanized, 6 months ago deployed to the Kythera sector, where warp storms threaten shipping lanes. Official casualty reports list his regiment as lost to the warp, bureaucratic phrasing that offers neither closure nor compensation beyond a one-time ration bonus. Her prayers follow imperial doctrine precisely. Additional litanies, blessed candles purchased with ration chits, formal petitions submitted through proper ministorum channels. Yet the Emperor's silence grows more profound with each passing week, while confession brings only platitudes about unknowable divine will from confessors more concerned with processing quotas than individual suffering. Yorick Hessel represents institutional abandonment, the second pathway toward spiritual compromise. At 57, his augmetic spine and replacement joints mark 4 decades of loyal dock service, moving the Prometheum drums that fuel the Imperium's war machine. But administratum actuarial tables show declining efficiency curves for workers approaching 60. Mandatory retirement looms within 18 months, followed by reassignment to corpse starch processing facilities, where human resources become literal nutrition for younger workers. His prayers increasingly focus on deliverance from this fate, But imperial doctrine offers no escape from demographic mathematics. The system that demanded his strength now prepares to consume his flesh, transforming promised eternal service into scheduled obsolescence. Kellen Voss exemplifies broken promises, the third crack in faith's foundation. His junior clerk position provides marginally better conditions than manufacturing work, but recent efficiency mandates restructure obligations while increasing burdens. Tithe assessments rise quarterly as his hablock deteriorates under deferred maintenance protocols. Educational advancement promised upon accepting clerical training remains perpetually delayed, pending budget allocations that never materialize. His access to administrative data reveals uncomfortable truths. Ration distributions favor upper tiers, while lower sectors receive increasingly diluted nutrition substitutes. The gap between official imperial doctrine and actual policy implementation becomes impossible to ignore when reviewing the numbers daily. These three citizens represent different demographics but identical spiritual erosion patterns. Control mechanisms designed to ensure compliance become sources of additional burden rather than comfort. Confession queues extend down stairwells as economic pressure increases desperation. Penance quotas rise to match productivity demands, transforming spiritual discipline into another form of labor obligation. Salvation certificates require fees that compete with basic nutrition purchases, turning absolution into luxury commodity. The ecclesiarchy's institutional response follows established protocols that address symptoms while avoiding systemic contradictions. Increased devotional requirements for grieving citizens like Marta, acceptance counseling for aging workers like Jorik, efficiency training for struggling clerks like Kellen. Each solution adds weight to already burdened lives without acknowledging the fundamental conflicts between pastoral care and administrative extraction. As these patterns multiply across the hive's lower sectors, whispers circulate about alternative devotional opportunities. Midnight prayer circles emerge to accommodate workers whose shifts prevent dawn congregations. The Ministorum authorizes these gatherings as acts of exceptional piety, offering double attendance credits toward salvation certificates and additional ration chits for those who brave curfew fog to kneel in small chapels. It represents legal kindness wrapped around dangerous possibility, sanctioned time that operates beyond normal oversight, where exhausted minds might seek meaning in arrangements the Emperor's representatives cannot easily monitor or control. Brother Angel's continued absence from evening devotions adds another element of uncertainty, his penitential reassignment, creating questions about what alternatives might exist for those whose faith requires different expressions than the administratum's carefully measured orthodoxy allows. The dangerous question lingers in recycled air long after shift-end klaxons sound. Kellen's silence in response to "Do you think the Emperor actually hears us down here?" becomes its own answer, creating a vacuum that Orthodox faith, with its transactional piety and bureaucratic indifference, can no longer fill. This spiritual void becomes fertile ground for alternatives, too subtle yet to be called heresy, but distinct enough to offer meaning where imperial doctrine provides only quotas and compliance metrics. Midnight devotionals emerge 3 weeks later from administrative necessity rather than seditious design. Workers whose shifts conflict with dawn prayers petition Supervisor Hecht for alternative arrangements, citing imperial doctrine requiring daily observance regardless of industrial scheduling. The Ministorum approves these gatherings as exceptional piety, offering double attendance credits and modest ration supplements for those demonstrating such dedication. What begins as accommodation gradually transforms into something more intimate and dangerous than anyone initially recognizes. The small chapel beneath Devotional Bay 7 holds perhaps 30 worshippers during these late sessions, their faces gaunt with exhaustion but softened by candlelight that flickers more warmly than regulation lumens. Here, without servo skulls scanning for compliance, conversations develop between liturgical recitations. Devotional confraternities coalesce around practical survival needs that imperial institutions address inadequately or not at all. Burial funds emerge when Marta mentions the cost of proper interment for workers whose families cannot afford ministorum fees. Injury coverage develops as dock accidents increase under productivity pressures that prioritize output over safety protocols. Jorik contributes to these pooled resources before his next augmetic joint replacement, insurance against the day when age makes him liability rather than asset. Child watch arrangements form when extended shifts leave families vulnerable to hab-block predators and structural collapses that maintenance defers indefinitely. The mutual aid operates within imperial law, sanctioned by ancient precedent, encouraging charitable works among the faithful, yet creates bonds transcending official oversight and fostering loyalty to the group rather than distant institutions. Language shifts imperceptibly during these gatherings, evolution too gradual for casual observation, but profound in cumulative effect. Lay scribe Veren, responsible for maintaining devotional texts damaged by perpetual moisture, opens bindings with gentle hands and precise knife work. When copying stanzas onto fresh leaves to replace rotted pages, he remains faithful to source material except for single words altered each week. Obedience becomes deliverance. Endurance shifts to empowerment. Submission transforms into dedication. The changes occur across months, allowing congregants to internalize new meanings without conscious recognition of doctrinal drift. Most significantly, hymn 847 7th stanza evolves from labor without witness sanctifies to labor without overseer sanctifies. The alteration appears subtle, same syllable count, similar cadence, but points in fundamentally different directions. Few notice consciously, but they feel the shift as words finally find proper weight. When Supervisor Hecht frowns at the variation, he relaxes as the refrain returns to orthodox form. Compliance metrics remain high, devotion continues, and the change settles like sand grain under gear teeth, patient and persistent. Our three citizens find themselves drawn to these sessions for warmth as much as spiritual comfort. Marta's lips move around altered liturgy, and she feels the ache in her chest ease for verse-length intervals. Her grief over her son's regiment, lost to the warp, according to bureaucratic phrasing that offers neither closure nor compensation, finds acknowledgement among others carrying similar burdens. Jorik sits near wall-mounted heat pipes, discovering that his decades of dock service provide valuable knowledge to the group rather than merely statistical liability. His advice on navigating administratum, forms and maximizing protein, substitute allocations earns respect that official channels no longer offer. Kellen trades spare Elo sticks for Medicare antiseptic that official dispensaries claim remains perpetually out of stock. His administrative access reveals uncomfortable truths about resource distribution, but here those insights serve community benefit rather than bureaucratic efficiency. Quiet barter supplements official rations as participants share what they can spare: protein bars for children, wound dressings for injured workers, information about supervisor schedules, and audit timings that help others avoid unwanted attention. Between prayers, a gesture spreads with organic momentum. Participants place their right hand over heart while extending the smallest finger slightly downward, barely perceptible unless one knows to watch. Lay scribe Veren explains it as the quiet blessing, ancient tradition from earliest imperial settlements where faithful workers honored the emperor's presence in places beyond official oversight. The motion acknowledges that divine attention extends everywhere, even to forgotten depths where his servants toil without witness from earthly authorities. The hand sign functions as recognition system among midnight congregants during daylight hours. In crowded devotional bays, the quiet blessing identifies others sharing similar spiritual hunger. Those responding correctly demonstrate membership in increasingly exclusive community bound by shared hardship and alternative understanding. The gesture carries no heretical content itself, merely acknowledging fellowship among those whose faith requires expression beyond standard liturgical forms, yet it gradually becomes recruitment filter for something more substantial. Institutional blind spots open naturally where attendance numbers satisfy oversight requirements. Midnight pews remain full, prompting ministorum clerks to note participation with relief and stamp additional credits with brisk efficiency. Shortage of ordained confessors means auxiliary lay staff run most sessions under mandates focused on keeping souls within sanctioned walls rather than monitoring doctrinal precision. Enforcers avoid chapel interiors whenever possible due to jurisdictional complications and paperwork requirements. Ledger entries for ration uplifts pass through lay brother logistics with proper imprimatures, each bearing docket codes that appear correct even to Kellen's practiced administrative eye. As winter deepens, rumours circulate about St. Matthias's third hand, relic of unusual provenance scheduled to visit Hive Tertius during Feast of Dust celebrations. The saint's biography remains obscure even in ecclesiarchy records, but promises of indulgences and ration uplifts draw desperate interest from lower sector populations struggling through seasonal shortages. Pilgrimage organizers announce that faithful attendance during the relics procession will earn blessed provisions sufficient to supplement nutrition for entire families, direct appeal to material conditions fueling nascent drift from orthodoxy. Kellen's administrative access reveals authorization chains for promised ration uplifts, but the bureaucratic mechanisms disappear into ministorum classifications beyond his clearance level. The disconnect between public promises and administrative reality suggests either exceptional generosity or alternative funding sources operating outside normal imperial channels. The quiet blessing takes on additional significance as midnight congregants prepare for the saint's arrival, transforming from simple recognition among struggling believers into identification system for those prepared for deeper spiritual experiences beyond standard pilgrimage activities. The promise of miracle draws crowds beyond normal devotional participation, creating vector for unprecedented convergence. What began as survival necessity among the desperate gradually evolves into something that orthodox imperial doctrine cannot easily contain or control, setting stage for events that will test the boundaries between acceptable piety and dangerous deviation. The dangerous question about divine attention creates ripple effects that trained observers recognize and exploit with systematic precision. What appears as spontaneous spiritual hunger among midnight congregants actually follows recruitment algorithms as methodical as administratum census protocols, sorting desperate populations for specific vulnerabilities while operating under perfect institutional cover. The quiet blessing, initially a gesture of recognition among the struggling faithful, transforms into the first filter in a selection process that maps human weakness with clinical thoroughness. Recruiters attend both sanctioned and midnight devotions with the patience of data collectors, noting behavioral patterns that indicate receptivity to alternative spiritual arrangements. They catalogue fatigue through physical tells, tremor frequency during prayer bead manipulation, blink rates during extended liturgy, hesitation intervals between kneel and rise commands. Exhaustion creates mental states where orthodox doctrine's transactional nature becomes unbearable, making workers susceptible to offers of meaning beyond industrial quotas and compliance metrics. The demographic sorting follows established vulnerability categories with algorithmic precision. Widowers, like Marta, represent grief-driven spiritual reorientation potential, their unanswered prayers creating resentment against imperial institutions that demand devotion while providing only bureaucratic comfort. Denied Medicaid cases carry physical pain combined with institutional abandonment, their suffering unaddressed by healthcare rationing that prioritizes productive workers over injured ones. Families of sanctioned psychers harbor shame and fear that orthodox doctrine handles inadequately, their experience with hidden powers making them receptive to alternative spiritual frameworks. Aging workers facing mandatory retirement to corpse starch processing facilities offer different leverage points. Jorik's decades of loyal dock service earn him nothing but scheduled obsolescence, his accumulated knowledge and augmetic maintenance costs transforming him from asset to liability in administratum calculations. Debtors under enforcer surveillance face material pressures that make any support network attractive regardless of theological implications, their desperation creating willingness to accept help from sources that orthodox faith condemns. The recruitment language operates through coded phrases embedded within legitimate devotional conversation, each carrying double meanings that test listener comprehension without exposing speakers to security risks. Deliverance appears throughout imperial liturgy referring to spiritual salvation, but among initiates suggests active rescue from hive conditions rather than passive endurance of suffering. Unseen patron technically acknowledges the emperor's omnipresence while hinting at more immediate sources of divine attention. Hidden strength officially means inner spiritual resources but implies power beyond imperial doctrine's limitations. These phrases function as recognition tests, allowing recruiters to identify individuals ready for deeper exploration without compromising operational security. Orthodox responses terminate conversations naturally, while coded replies indicating understanding earn secondary evaluation. The system exploits institutional blind spots where religious discussion receives minimal scrutiny due to jurisdictional complications between administratum efficiency mandates and ministorum theological authority. Marta encounters her first recruitment approach during evening devotions following St. Matthias's relic announcement. An elderly woman she recognizes from midnight sessions approaches after formal prayers, commenting on Marta's devotion to her lost son while emphasizing deliverance in contexts absent from standard ministorum comfort. When Marta responds with recognition rather than confusion, the woman mentions kitchen litanies, where faithful workers share blessed meals during shift changes, offering nourishment beyond official ration allocations. The invitation arrives wrapped in charitable language sanctioned by ecclesiarchy policy, encouraging auxiliary feeding programs during major religious celebrations. St. Matthias's relic tour provides institutional cover for expanded communal activities, allowing organizers to distribute food while maintaining regulatory compliance. Kitchen litanies occur in backrooms of devotional facilities, small gatherings where participants share simple meals prepared with ingredients whose provenance remains deliberately obscure. Jorik learns recognition signals through accumulated observation rather than direct approach, his doc experience providing pattern recognition skills that identify systematic behavior among congregants. Certain individuals appear at multiple sessions despite shift schedules that should prevent such attendance. The quiet blessing propagates with geometric progression, suggesting coordinated dissemination rather than organic adoption. When recruiters finally approach him through a stevedore who blesses himself left-handed, while murmuring about unseen patronage, Jorik understands the invitation before they finish speaking. Kellen's administrative access makes him particularly valuable to networks requiring bureaucratic navigation and document authentication. His recruitment occurs through professional channels, beginning with requests for assistance with ration distribution forms and pilgrimage logistics. The work appears legitimate, supporting charitable feeding programs, but gradually reveals complexity, suggesting coordination beyond local ministorum capabilities. Authorization chains disappear into classifications beyond his clearance, yet paperwork bears proper imprimaturs and passes routine audits without triggering security reviews. Kitchen litanies present themselves as meals rather than meetings, their back rooms filled with stock-scented steam that fogs surveillance equipment while providing cover for operational discussions. The first 10 minutes remain unquestionably legal. Brief prayers, ladled portions, bread distribution, everything recorded in ledgers bearing ministorum stamps. Then conversations narrow to coded exchanges where deliverance gets defined in passive voice, and unseen patrons receive praise with adjectives that fit any saint until contextual meaning shifts toward something more immediate and dangerous. Three-person cell structure emerges through these recruitment patterns, creating redundant leadership that protects operational security while maintaining communication efficiency. Each cell contains one primary coordinator handling recruitment and theological guidance, one technical specialist providing necessary skills like administrative access or industrial knowledge, and one courier responsible for inter-cell communication. The structure ensures no single arrest can compromise entire networks while allowing systematic expansion according to established demographic criteria. Courier networks operate through Imperial infrastructure, distributing hymnal updates and devotional materials through channels that ecclesiarchy policy requires to remain open for pastoral communication. Drop schedules align with shift rotations, allowing messages to flow through industrial timing that appears routine to oversight systems. Hymn notation serves as encryption method, musical arrangements containing embedded instructions readable only by those possessing appropriate training. Fourth verse indicates meeting locations, fifth stanza signals timing, margin annotations disguised as penance counts carry operational directives. The system exploits institutional blind spots where religious materials receive minimal scrutiny due to jurisdictional complications. Arbites reviewing confiscated papers see piety and poor penmanship. Cell members reading identical documents see coordinates, schedules, and security protocols hidden within orthodox devotional content. Communication occurs during sanctioned activities whenever possible, using kitchen litanies and prayer gatherings as cover for coordination that proceeds under direct observation without triggering suspicion. As St. Matthias's relic tour approaches, recruitment activity intensifies around logistical preparations for expanded pilgrimage activities. Kitchen litanies multiply to accommodate anticipated crowds, requiring additional volunteers and coordination that provides cover for network expansion. The relic itself remains mysterious, its provenance obscure even in official ecclesiarchy records. Yet, promises associated with its presence attract desperate populations whose material conditions make them receptive to spiritual alternatives. Authorization chains for promised ration uplifts disappear into ministorum classifications that even Kellen's administrative access cannot penetrate, suggesting either exceptional generosity or funding sources operating outside normal imperial channels. The disconnect between public promises and administrative reality points toward resources and coordination transcending local capabilities, while the systematic recruitment patterns indicate organization requiring training and support beyond what struggling workers could develop independently. The careful integration with sanctioned imperial activities creates operational security that makes detection extremely difficult for authorities focused on maintaining attendance numbers rather than monitoring theological precision. What began as mutual aid among desperate believers evolves into sophisticated networks preparing for events that will test boundaries between acceptable piety and dangerous deviation, with St. Matthias's third hand serving as focal point for convergence whose true nature remains hidden behind promises of miracle and sustenance. Kitchen litanies transform into kitchen liturgies through accumulated theological pressure that bends familiar doctrine without breaking institutional cover. The back rooms remain identical: steam-thick air-fogging surveillance equipment, cracked tiles bearing decades of grease stains, stock pots breathing quietly over promethium burners. But the spiritual center of gravity shifts from charitable feeding toward doctrinal instruction. Where organizers once counted bowls distributed, they now measure moments of shared silence, as if calculating invisible resources flowing between participants. Lay scribe Veron's textual alterations accelerate during preparations for St. Matthias's relic tour, his careful knife work extending beyond simple word substitution into theological reinterpretation that maintains surface orthodoxy while pointing toward fundamentally different spiritual arrangements. A sermon footnote discussing labor's sanctifying properties expands through marginal commentary, suggesting that labor sanctifies actually means labor purchases favor, with divine powers responsive to human effort rather than bureaucratic compliance. The distinction appears subtle to tired eyes desperate for meaning, but carries profound implications for how believers understand their relationship with the emperor and his intermediary saints, transactional piety already embedded within imperial doctrine through ration chits tied to devotional attendance, and salvation certificates requiring fees, slides naturally toward purchasing absolution through alternative channels promising more immediate returns on spiritual investment. Where orthodox faith demands endurance of suffering as proof of devotion, the emerging shadow catechism reframes suffering as currency that can be spent rather than merely accumulated. Pain becomes purchasing power, secrecy transforms into sacrament. Blood serves as proof of work, demonstrating commitment beyond mere verbal profession. The first true kitchen liturgy occurs 3 weeks before St. Matthias's scheduled arrival, 18 participants gathering around makeshift altar constructed from promethium drum lids bearing the 3-dot quality stamps that have become increasingly common throughout the docks. Marta, Jorik and Kellen find themselves seated together, their recruitment paths converging around shared experience of institutional abandonment and spiritual hunger that orthodox imperial doctrine addresses inadequately. The meal begins with familiar prayers but evolves into something more intimate and dangerous as participants consume blessed grease that burns too hot and sweet on their tongues. The substance appears as cooking oil but carries metallic tang and unusual viscosity, suggesting promethium enhancement, its effects becoming apparent as participants experience heightened awareness and subtle euphoria that makes familiar prayers resonate with unexpected intensity. Marta's cracked hand, steady as warmth, spreads through hollowed ribs. Jorik's augmetic joints ease their chronic aching. Kellen's pupils tighten, then bloom, his administrative mind processing sensory input with enhanced clarity that reveals patterns previously hidden in routine devotional activities. Brother Angel emerges from shadows at the meal's conclusion, his 3-week absence explained as penitential reassignment that actually involved theological study and spiritual preparation for the saints' relic tour. His presence validates their activities while providing doctrinal framework for experiences that orthodox imperial theology cannot adequately explain or contain. The lay preacher speaks softly with the cadence of someone who has returned from borders and brought news of different maps. According to Brother Angel's research, St. Matthias recognized that human suffering under imperial rule served as spiritual currency, accumulating interest in realms beyond mortal oversight. The emperor operates as sleeping god whose attention flows through intermediary powers responsive to proper offerings, with blood and secrecy serving as preferred tender for transactions transcending normal bureaucratic channels. Humanity possesses divine potential that imperial doctrine suppresses through institutional ignorance rather than malice, requiring awakening through courage to look beyond rigid ecclesiarchy limitations. The Shadow Catechism develops through accumulated discussions where participants explore theological implications of their enhanced experiences. Suffering becomes currency measured, recorded, and offered as purchase price for divine attention. Secrecy hardens into sacrament where what you can keep safe. Blood transforms into proof of work, validating transactions through marks that cannot be forged cheaply. Oaths whisper over steaming pots while palms meet blades and drops sizzle in enhanced grease, vanishing as if accepted into spiritual accounts. St. Matthias's third hand arrives in miniature form long before public procession, its reliquary serving as mobile anchor for gatherings following the relic's tour schedule while maintaining perfect institutional cover. The casket measures forearm length, brass-bound and lead-sealed, carried in oilcloth by dock hands who look at nothing while seeing everything. Brother Angel lets it rest beside cooking pots like sunken altar, never opening the container but allowing its presence to validate increasingly heterodox teachings about divine potential beyond orthodox limitations. Moral cost ladders emerge as participants demonstrate commitment through escalating transgressions against imperial behavioral expectations. Small lies about whereabouts during kitchen liturgies progress toward forbidden rites involving candlelight oaths sworn with palm cuts and blood drops mixed into blessed grease. Test transgressions follow as group cohesion strengthens. Purity seals on promethium drums receive deliberate smudges shaping accidental flaws into discrete sigils, 3 dots pressed triangularly at wax edges, private punctuation, claiming public objects for alternative spiritual purposes. Kellen's administrative access reveals systematic discrepancies in promethium distribution records, approximately 3% of monthly allocations disappearing through evaporation that remains below. Audit thresholds triggering security reviews. The missing fuel appears in kitchen liturgy supplies through micro-siphons, soaked rags wrung over basins, residue scraped from valve housings, drippings caught under tapped drums, marked discreetly with 3-dot quality stamps. This tolerated wastage funds enhanced cooking oil production while creating sustainable resource base for activities blurring boundaries between charitable feeding and heretical worship. Father Corvin, an honest confessor serving evening sessions, raises flags about altered hymn lines and unusual devotional practices among midnight congregants, filing detailed reports documenting specific textual variations and behavioral anomalies indicating systematic deviation from approved liturgical forms. However, these concerns disappear into administratum triage protocols under efficiency mandates prioritizing crisis response over routine theological maintenance, creating institutional blind spots where doctrinal drift proceeds undetected while authorities focus on attendance metrics rather than theological precision. The approaching relic tour provides deadline pressure, accelerating both recruitment activities and theological development as participants prepare for convergence events, promising unprecedented spiritual experiences. Kitchen liturgies multiply to accommodate expanding participation while maintaining operational security through distributed scheduling and redundant leadership structures. Their careful integration with sanctioned religious activities, creating camouflage that makes detection extremely difficult for oversight systems designed to count compliance rather than evaluate content. The careful theological drift creates alternative spiritual framework, operating parallel to official imperial doctrine, its shadow catechism reframing fundamental concepts about divine attention, human potential, and proper spiritual currency. As participants internalize these concepts while maintaining surface compliance with orthodox requirements, they prepare for revelations that will test boundaries between acceptable piety and dangerous deviation, with St. Matthias's third hand serving as focal point for convergence whose true nature remains hidden behind promises of miracle and divine favor earned through proper offerings of suffering, secrecy, and blood. The theological drift from suffering as endurance towards suffering as currency requires physical infrastructure to sustain its growth beyond kitchen conversations and whispered oaths. What begins as enhanced grease, shared among desperate believers, scales into a complex logistical operation whose arteries flow through the very imperial systems designed to prevent such deviation. Prometheum allotments, incense shipments, devotional medal distribution runs. Each sanctioned channel transforms into a conduit for sedition, creating a shadow economy of faith that operates within bureaucratic blind spots while preparing for tomorrow's convergence. The 3% promethium evaporation rate, previously dismissed as acceptable industrial wastage in administratum audit protocols, becomes the financial foundation for network expansion. Ghost shifts during maintenance windows allow trusted dock workers to move drums bearing 3-dot quality stamps through channels that appear routine to oversight focused on production quotas rather than inventory precision. Micro-siphons bite like careful insects, leaving punctures that mimic maintenance wear while draining enhanced fuel into buckets that never appear on any manifest. These containers carry standard promethium enhanced with additives that transform cooking oil into sacramental substance, the enhancement process requiring technical knowledge, suggesting coordination beyond what struggling workers could develop independently. Jorik's decades of dock experience provide the expertise necessary for these micro-diversions. His hands, knowing instinctively the weight difference between full drums and those carrying additional cargo. He teaches Marta and Kellen to recognize the subtle puncture marks versus regulation tap points, the enhanced fuel flowing through established smuggling channels that exploit jurisdictional complications between administratum efficiency mandates and enforcer security protocols. What once served as vendor identification now functions as cult semaphore. 3 dots angled left indicating ghost shift operations, right meaning hold position, centered signaling safe passage through curfew fog that thickens around the docks. Kellen's clerical access reveals the bureaucratic architecture supporting these operations through his routine processing of lay brother logistics guild paperwork. The guild coordinates pilgrim feeding during St. Matthias's relic tour, their ledgers showing primary numbers in standard imperial notation alongside secondary figures written in hymn notation that passes as pious enthusiasm to inattentive clerks. These encoded communications coordinate activities across 17 cells, spanning 4 hab blocks through shift schedules and hymnal distribution, that appears as routine pastoral care to systems monitoring attendance rather than content. 4th verse annotations indicate meeting locations, while 5th stanza margin notes carry timing instructions. Penance counts disguised as devotional markings provide operational directives flowing through channels the ecclesiarchy requires to remain open for spiritual communication. The countersign for releasing supply pallets becomes the 7th line of hymn 847, hummed under breath and clipped before the final note, musical passwords hiding in plain sight among legitimate devotional activities that no overseer questions too closely. Dock Supervisor Creel emerges as key logistics coordinator, his unblemished service record and smile that never reaches his eyes providing perfect cover for moving sensitive materials under official scrutiny. St. Matthias's reliquary travels with proper enforcer escort and documentation bearing correct imprimatures, yet blessed grease tins disappear from inventory through systematic seepage that remains below audit thresholds designed to catch major theft rather than micro-diversions. The reliquary itself serves as mobile anchor for gatherings, its sealed presence validating increasingly heterodox activities through spiritual authority participants cannot question without undermining their own faith. Black market promethium reaches backroom altars where whispered oaths are sealed with heat and palm cuts, the enhanced fuel burning too clean while leaving metallic tang, suggesting chemical modification beyond standard Imperial specifications. These hidden spaces multiply throughout the lower hive as network expansion accelerates, each equipped with drum lids, serving as tables, and warming trays, functioning as braziers for rituals that blur the line between devotional practice and heretical worship. The distributed cell structure creates redundancy, protecting operational security, while allowing systematic expansion according to established demographic criteria. Each three-person unit contains a primary coordinator handling recruitment and theological guidance, a technical specialist providing necessary skills like administrative access or industrial knowledge, and a courier responsible for inter-cell communication through Imperial infrastructure. Devotional medals become operational tokens, their ribbon colors indicating roles within the network: thread-dyed, sump blue for couriers, ash gray for kitchen hands, candle ivory for those capable of handling sensitive materials without detection. The approaching Feast of Dust provides convergence point for months of careful preparation. Its authorized ration uplifts, creating legitimate cover for resource distribution, while published procession routes allow tactical positioning disguised as pious attendants. The bends create choke points where crowds must compress. Stairwells funnel bodies into lanes measured against kettle size and doorway width. Incense crates arriving for tomorrow's celebration weigh heavier than standard Imperial specifications should allow, their manifest documentation bearing proper authorization codes, yet carrying additional materials whose purpose remains obscured by legitimate religious supplies. Kellen's administrative review reveals authorization chains for promised ration uplifts, disappearing into ministorum classifications beyond his clearance level, suggesting either exceptional generosity or funding sources operating outside normal Imperial channels. The disconnect between public promises and administrative reality points toward coordination requiring resources and expertise transcending local capabilities, while systematic recruitment patterns indicate organization beyond what mutual aid among struggling workers could produce independently. In candle-lit chambers, where enhanced grease burns in shallow pans, Brother Angel performs final blessings over St. Matthias's reliquary. His whispered words follow familiar liturgical forms yet carry emphasis suggesting meanings beyond orthodox interpretation, their cadence matching hymn notation found in lay brother logistics ledgers. The sealed casket measures forearm length, brass-bound and lead-sealed, carried in oilcloth by dock hands who maintain perfect operational security through studied indifference. No seal is broken, yet those nearby report the box grows warmer after he speaks, and when palms hiss on hot metal, the casket answers with vibrations felt in the teeth. His eyes reflect firelight that seems to burn from within rather than from external sources, fervent anticipation mixing with knowledge he cannot share until the proper moment arrives. By morning, 10,000 bodies will press along corridors mapped by song and stamped by seal. Authority will watch the box. Something inside will watch back. 6 months after that first dangerous question echoed through recycled air, the network has evolved beyond tentative mutual aid into something that tests the boundaries between heterodox faith and outright sedition. The logistics mapped in recent weeks now serve a spiritual infrastructure that Brother Angel guides with increasing boldness, his penitential reassignment, having provided time to develop theological frameworks that Imperial doctrine cannot easily contain. Kitchen liturgies accommodate 17 participants across multiple shifts, their back rooms thick with steam that carries enhanced grease vapors and whispered instruction in equal measure. The careful theological drift that began with single-word alterations in devotional texts has accelerated into doctrinal revision that Brother Angel delivers with the confidence of someone who has gazed beyond imperial limitations. The Emperor, according to his increasingly bold teachings, functions not as active divine presence, but as sleeping God, whose attention flows through intermediary powers more responsive to human need than bureaucratic compliance. Humanity possesses psychic destiny that orthodox imperial doctrine suppresses through institutional ignorance rather than malice, requiring awakening through courage to explore spiritual potential beyond rigid ecclesiarchy limitations. The saints venerated in standard liturgy represent false saints whose manufactured miracles distract from genuine divine power accessible to those willing to pay proper spiritual currency. These teachings progress from whispered speculation to confident assertion as participants experience phenomena that orthodox faith cannot adequately explain or contain. Marta discovers her voice carries further than physics should allow, her whispers reaching across crowded devotional bays while bypassing intervening conversations entirely. During kitchen liturgies, her words seem to resonate inside listeners' minds rather than merely entering through normal auditory channels, her grief over her lost son transforming from passive endurance into active power that demands recognition from both divine and human authorities. Jorik's aging body shows impossible improvement despite decades of dock labor that should have left him increasingly frail. His strength increases rather than diminishes, scarred palms lifting promethium drums with ease that surprises even veteran stevedores accustomed to chemical enhancement. The blessed grease seems to interact with his augmetic components in ways that imperial tech priests would find deeply disturbing, metal and flesh achieving harmony through spiritual enhancement rather than mechanical precision. His ritual palm cuts heal faster than baseline human physiology allows, leaving marks that pulse with warmth during moments of stress or concentration. Kellen's administrative mind processes bureaucratic data with enhanced clarity that reveals patterns previously hidden in routine paperwork, but his eyes reflect light with metallic sheen suggesting biological changes accompanying spiritual awakening. During kitchen liturgies, his pupils dilate and contract independently of ambient illumination, responding to stimuli invisible to other participants. He reports seeing administrative hierarchies as geometric structures and promethium flow rates as living networks pulsing with their own rhythms, enhancements that allow him to navigate imperial bureaucracy with unprecedented efficiency while concealing the source of his improved performance. The quiet blessing evolves beyond simple recognition gesture into blood oath sealed through palm scarification that creates permanent bond between participants. Fresh cuts heal into raised marks arranged in subtle triangular patterns, their surfaces pulsing with shared rhythm during moments of spiritual intensity. The scars serve as identification system impossible to counterfeit, their arrangements encoding cell affiliation and operational clearance levels through patterns that appear accidental to casual observation, but carry precise meaning to trained eyes. Blood memory becomes unbreakable oath, physical manifestation of commitment that transcends verbal profession. Operational security matures as cells adopt redundant leadership structures, protecting against imperial detection while maintaining communication efficiency. Each unit develops shadow coordinators capable of assuming primary roles if arrests compromise visible leadership, while courier networks using hymn notation grow more sophisticated in their encryption methods. Messages flow through imperial infrastructure, disguised as devotional materials, their musical arrangements containing embedded instructions readable only by those possessing appropriate training. Fourth verse annotations indicate meeting locations, while fifth stanza margins carry timing instructions, creating a communication system that operates under direct observation without triggering suspicion. The first awakening ritual occurs during a kitchen liturgy where St. Matthias's third hand rests beside cooking pots, its sealed presence validating increasingly heterodox activities Through spiritual authority, participants cannot question. Brother Angel guides a junior member through meditation focused on spiritual currency accumulated through months of suffering and service, the participant's consciousness expanding beyond individual awareness while touching minds of others present. Reality bends subtly around the reliquary as psychic energy flows through channels that orthodox imperial theology denies exist, candle flames flickering without wind, while metal objects vibrate in harmonic resonance with the sealed casket. The awakening demonstrates corruption affecting both spiritual and biological systems, transforming participants at cellular level while expanding mental capabilities beyond baseline human parameters. Enhanced grease consumption creates physical changes that prepare bodies for psychic manifestation, while theological instruction provides framework for understanding experiences that imperial doctrine condemns as heretical deviation. The combination produces individuals capable of abilities that threaten imperial control systems designed to suppress rather than develop human potential, their enhanced capabilities creating operational advantages that traditional security measures cannot easily counter. Arbite's raids targeting suspected cult activities achieve arrests but fail to dismantle the network effectively, their numbers misaligning with intelligence estimates, suggesting systematic underestimation of operational scope. Detained participants maintain operational security through scarification oaths that bind silence more effectively than imperial interrogation techniques, while cell structure ensures no single arrest compromises entire networks. The raids reveal adaptation and evolution, cells becoming harder to detect as they develop countermeasures against imperial surveillance methods through lessons learned from initial security failures. Captured materials include devotional texts bearing marginal annotations that appear as pious enthusiasm to investigators unfamiliar with hymn notation encryption, while promethium samples test within acceptable variance ranges despite enhancement that transforms cooking oil into sacramental substance. Kitchen facilities show evidence of charitable feeding programs sanctioned by ecclesiarchy policy, their back rooms equipped with standard cooking equipment that doubles as ritual apparatus without triggering security reviews, focused on weapons rather than spiritual implements. The investigation reveals institutional blind spots where religious activities receive minimal scrutiny due to jurisdictional complications between administratum efficiency mandates and ministorum theological authority. Arbite's officers lack training to recognize doctrinal deviation disguised as exceptional piety, while ecclesiarchy staff focus on attendance metrics rather than theological precision. The gap between security protocols and religious oversight creates operational space where heretical networks can mature beyond detection thresholds while maintaining perfect compliance with bureaucratic requirements. As St. Matthias's relic tour approaches culmination, awakened participants prepare for convergence events that will test their enhanced capabilities against imperial detection protocols. The reliquary's sealed contents promise revelations that transcend normal pilgrimage activities, while accumulated months of spiritual enhancement create conditions for manifestations beyond what Orthodox faith can contain or control. Tomorrow's Feast of Dust will determine whether careful preparation produces genuine transformation or exposes the network to imperial justice through public revelation of powers that desperate believers have learned to channel through proper offerings of suffering, secrecy, and blood. Dawn breaks brown over Hive Tertius's ceremonial avenue, filtered light the color of dried blood, casting long shadows between devotional banners that snap in recycled wind. 10,000 pilgrims crowd shoulder to shoulder beneath vox amplifiers mounted on cathedral spires, their voices joining hymn 847 in measured cadences that create harmonic resonance felt through boot soles and rib cages. The familiar melody carries across packed bodies, while vendors move through the crowd selling LHO sticks rolled in prayer slips, their merchandise blessed by junior confessors who stamp each purchase with Aquila seals. Incense braziers burn sweet with promethium enhancement, their smoke carrying metallic tang familiar to participants in kitchen liturgies, the enhanced fuel-creating atmosphere thick enough to fog surveillance equipment. The saint's third hand arrives in crystalline casket borne by 8 enforcers, whose ceremonial armor gleams with fresh blessing oils, their honor guard formation flanking the procession while servo skulls drift overhead recording attendance for administrative purposes. The reliquary catches morning light through faceted crystal walls, its contents visible as shadowed outline that awakened participants recognize as something far more significant than the bone fragments promised in official announcements. Marta stands near the processional route, her scarified palms pulsing with shared rhythm as other believers scattered throughout the crowd respond to subtle positioning signals learned during months of careful preparation. Jorik's dock supervisor credentials provide legitimate authority for crowd management, while his enhanced physiology allows him to move through packed bodies with impossible ease, his augmetic components achieving harmony with ritual-enhanced flesh. Kellen's administrative mind processes crowd dynamics with clarity that reveals energy flows connecting awakened participants through networks pulsing with their own rhythms, his eyes reflecting light with metallic sheen, suggesting biological changes accompanying spiritual awakening. The geometric structures visible to his enhanced perception show synchronization patterns preparing for manifestation that will transform individual capabilities into collective power. The hymn reaches its 7th stanza as the reliquary approaches the ceremonial platform, Brother Angel stepping forward from the crowd with confidence born of months developing theological frameworks beyond imperial limitations. His presence validates activities that began as mutual aid among desperate believers and evolved into sophisticated networks preparing for revelations transcending normal pilgrimage experiences. The 7th stanza triggers mass activation among awakened participants as the quiet blessing ripples through the crowd like visible wave, scarified palms rising in synchronized gesture that appears as spontaneous, devotional enthusiasm to observers unfamiliar with its operational significance. Brother Angel's hands find the casket seals with practiced precision, his whispered words following familiar liturgical forms yet carrying emphasis, suggesting meanings beyond orthodox interpretation. The crystalline walls part to reveal contents that justify months of careful preparation. Not St. Matthias's third hand, but a warp-tainted xenolith crusted with crimson dust, its alien geometry hurting eyes that try to focus on surfaces existing in more dimensions than human perception can process. The artifact pulses with inner light that seems to absorb surrounding illumination, creating void that resonates with enhanced physiology of awakened believers. The air bends around the revealed xenolith as reality shivers under pressure from forces imperial science categorically denies. 17 seconds of impossible manifestation during which shapes move in peripheral vision while the crowd stands transfixed. Marta's whispers become visible as silver threads connecting minds throughout the gathering, her voice resonating inside listeners' consciousness while bypassing normal auditory channels entirely. The grief that drove her toward alternative spiritual arrangements transforms into active power, threading through awakened believers like conductor through orchestra, coordinating movement with precision that makes crowd control impossible. Jorik's aged frame swells with unnatural strength, allowing him to lift ceremonial barriers with ease that should be impossible, his enhanced capabilities creating physical advantages that traditional security measures cannot counter. The dock supervisor's decades of experience provide perfect cover for shepherding other participants through chaos while maintaining operational security learned during kitchen liturgies. Kellen's eyes burn within a fire As enhanced consciousness expands beyond individual awareness, words emerging from his throat in no, human tongue carrying harmonic frequencies that resonate with the xenolith's alien geometry while triggering responses among other awakened participants. The Arbite's klaxon sounds too late as awakening cascades through the crowd, its mechanical wail barely audible above harmonic resonance created by voices speaking languages predating human civilization. Security protocols designed for conventional riots prove inadequate against manifestations operating through channels. Imperial doctrine refuses to acknowledge enhanced believers demonstrating capabilities that threaten fundamental assumptions about human limitations. Lasfire cuts through incense smoke as enforcer units attempt dispersal, their weapons proving ineffective against targets whose enhanced physiology allows absorption of energy that should prove lethal. In the chaos of sirens and screaming pilgrims, the xenolith passes hand to hand through networks prepared by months of coordination, its alien presence validating theological instruction about humanity's psychic destiny while providing focal point for manifestations transcending normal pilgrimage experiences. Creel appears with Porter's stoop and 3-dot scarification, receiving the artifact from Brother Angel as if accepting routine cargo before passing it onward through chain of awakened believers. The stone disappears into maintenance tunnels as participants utilize enhanced capabilities and operational security to evade Imperial response, their cell structure ensuring no single arrest can compromise entire networks. The convergence reveals whether desperate believers seeking meaning beyond industrial quotas have discovered genuine transformation or exposed themselves to Imperial justice through public revelation of powers threatening the very foundations upon which the Imperium maintains control over human potential. Sirens fade into procedural rhythm within hours as Imperial response protocols transform chaotic manifestation into administrative procedure, the mechanical wail settling into patterns older than anyone present can remember. Arbites deploy from precincts across 3 sectors with doctrinal certainty born from centuries of suppressing heretical outbreaks, their black armor gleaming with fresh purity seals, while servo skulls drift overhead, recording every face for cross-reference with attendance records and ration distribution logs. Enforcers seal ward boundaries using protocols designed for plague containment, energy barriers, and razor wire, transforming the ceremonial avenue into quarantine zone where movement requires authorization codes stamped by officials whose hands shake as they process reports describing phenomena their training insists cannot exist. The Ministorum's response follows established patterns refined through countless purges, Cardinal Voss broadcasting calls for penance and blood donations to replace what was lost during the manifestation. The language carefully avoids acknowledging what actually occurred while providing framework for population compliance, transforming witnessed impossibilities into spiritual deficit requiring renewed devotion rather than investigation. Donation centers appear within hours, their collection apparatus staffed by junior confessors whose eyes hold the hollow distance of those processing trauma through ritual repetition rather than genuine understanding. Purge protocols unfold with industrial efficiency that converts theological crisis into manageable administrative tasks. Block-by-block cordons divide the affected area into numbered segments for systematic processing, each checkpoint manned by Arbite's teams equipped with Auspex scanners calibrated to detect psychic resonance and biological anomalies. Confessor triage stations process detained citizens through rapid screening designed to identify heretical contamination, their questions probing for exposure to enhanced grease, participation in kitchen liturgies, or knowledge of hymn notation encryption methods discovered in seized devotional materials. Attendance record analysis reveals infiltration scope through cross-referencing midnight devotional participants with ceremonial avenue positioning during the manifestation servo skull footage providing facial recognition data that maps networks with uncomfortable precision. The same faces appear at multiple sessions despite shift schedules that should prevent such attendance, while ration uplift rosters show systematic coordination, suggesting organization beyond what desperate workers could develop independently. Administrative clerks work through extended shifts processing detention orders, while their supervisors struggle with jurisdictional complications between Ministorum Theological Authority and Administratum Efficiency, mandates that created the operational blind spots. Heretical networks exploited. Economic fallout cascades through the hive's industrial infrastructure as production lines idle under security lockdowns, prioritizing purge operations over manufacturing quotas. Tithe assessments redline as workforce disruption threatens quarterly obligations to sector command. Administratum clerks elevating the subsector to contingency posture, exactis severe, while calculating compensation formulas that demand increased output from remaining workers. Food rations tighten further as distribution networks require security screening that delays shipments beyond preservation thresholds, creating secondary crisis requiring resources that compete with investigation priorities. The reliquary escort team faces immediate purge within hours of the manifestation, their ceremonial armor providing no protection against accusations of complicity in heretical activities. Bodies hang from manufactorum gantry cranes by dawn, official reports citing failure of duty while avoiding mention of the impossible phenomena they witnessed. Creel's fate proves more specific, found in detention with throat cut and 3 dots carved deep into his forehead with a detainer's key, the wound patterns suggesting internal reckoning by cult networks silencing potential intelligence sources before Imperial interrogation could extract operational details about smuggling operations and enhanced fuel distribution. Paper trails surfaced during administrative review, revealing how ration authorizations flowed through lay brother logistics using legitimate Ministorum imprimatur, each document bearing proper codes signed by junior staff following administratum efficiency mandates designed to streamline charitable feeding programs. The bureaucratic architecture that enabled heretical growth operates within established protocols, creating institutional embarrassment that officials address through scapegoating rather than systemic reform. Junior clerks face detention while senior administrators claim ignorance of operational details their policies created, the blame flowing downward through hierarchies designed to protect authority rather than acknowledge failure. Jurisdictional conflicts emerge as institutions collide over responsibility for security failures that allowed heretical networks to mature undetected within sanctioned religious activities. Ministorum officials blame administratum efficiency mandates for creating oversight gaps, while administratum representatives cite ecclesiarchy theological authority as justification for avoiding scrutiny of devotional practices. Arbeits investigators navigate political complications that impede investigation, while the xenolith remains missing despite systematic searches of maintenance tunnels and abandoned sectors where Auspex readings spike before environmental interference renders equipment unreliable. Our 3 citizens face divergent fates as imperial justice processes participants according to available evidence and institutional priorities. Marta vanishes during initial cordon operations, her enhanced abilities allowing movement through security perimeters designed for baseline human capabilities, while scarification networks provide safe houses among awakened believers who understand operational security requirements. Her whispers that carry further than physics create communication advantages enabling coordination beyond traditional surveillance capabilities, silver threads of connection flowing through awakened minds scattered throughout the purge zone. Jorik dies resisting arrest when Arbeits teams attempt detention at Dock Spur 9, his enhanced strength allowing him to lift steel barriers like timber before overlapping rifle fire brings him down. Official reports describe the incident as workplace accident during routine questioning, his death eliminating a witness whose knowledge of smuggling operations and promethium diversions threatens to expose broader institutional complicity in heretical activities. His augmetic components are logged for scrap recovery, while enhanced fuel supplies disappear into evidence storage, where their chemical composition receives minimal analysis due to jurisdictional complications. Kellen's clerical immunity delays his processing as administrative protocols require superior authorization before detaining administratum personnel, creating window for evidence destruction and network communication that other participants lack. His access to bureaucratic systems allows deletion of records linking him to kitchen liturgies, while his enhanced perception reveals surveillance patterns enabling evasion through timing and positioning invisible to baseline human awareness. The delay provides operational advantages that surviving cell members exploit for damage control and resource preservation. The Purge treats the uprising as endpoint requiring cleanup rather than investigation, Imperial doctrine insisting that heretical contamination can be excised through sufficient application of fire and bureaucratic procedure. However, cell structure ensures that network life continues beyond visible manifestation, awakened survivors treating the Imperial response as stress test rather than termination event. They adapt to overwhelming scrutiny through enhanced capabilities and operational security. Learned during months of preparation, the cells mutating under pressure to become smaller, more secretive, harder to detect as they develop countermeasures against Imperial surveillance methods. Underground networks shift from kitchen liturgies to more dispersed arrangements using maintenance tunnels and abandoned sectors where surveillance equipment fails due to environmental conditions and infrastructure decay. Enhanced grease production moves to portable operations using equipment that leaves minimal traces, while hymn notation encryption evolves into more sophisticated codes resistant to administrative analysis. The Xenolith's disappearance into maintenance systems creates mobile focal point for manifestations that can appear anywhere within the Hive's extensive infrastructure network. Machine spirits whisper associations through data networks while human clerks process detention forms, but the numbers refuse to align properly. Arrests fall short of estimates derived from attendance records and ration distribution data, suggesting either systematic underestimation of network scope or successful evasion by participants whose enhanced abilities provide advantages in avoiding Imperial detection. The disconnect between projected and actual results indicates adaptation capabilities that transcend conventional security assumptions about human limitations and organizational capacity. As investigation continues through procedural channels designed for conventional heretical outbreaks, surviving participants demonstrate coordination suggesting external support beyond local capabilities. Their enhanced abilities provide tactical advantages while months of preparation created operational security that conventional purge protocols cannot easily penetrate. The cleansing fire burns visible targets while deeper roots remain hidden in infrastructure that Imperial doctrine refuses to acknowledge, setting stage for evolution that will test boundaries between acceptable devotion and dangerous deviation in ways bureaucratic solutions cannot address or contain. The ledger remains unbalanced, and the system will inevitably try again. The disconnect between projected arrests and actual detentions forces uncomfortable examination of institutional architecture, revealing the reframe that transforms administrative failure into existential threat. Investigation teams working through seized documents and detention testimonies uncover a truth more disturbing than individual corruption. The very systems designed to inoculate against heresy served as its most efficient vectors. The hidden hand guiding the cult's growth was not external infiltration, but the Imperium's own bureaucratic logic, its efficiency mandates creating the infrastructure that heretical networks exploited with devastating precision. Sanctioned lay brother logistics emerges as the primary culprit through post-purge analysis. Its legitimate authority to coordinate charitable feeding programs, providing perfect cover for resource distribution while maintaining regulatory compliance. Originally designed to feed pilgrims efficiently during religious celebrations, the Guild became the cult's nervous system through incremental exploitation of bureaucratic blind spots rather than dramatic corruption. Inspection immunity during religious processions created blind corridors where enhanced materials moved under official escort without triggering security reviews. The same protocols designed to protect sacred activities, enabling heretical infrastructure to operate with institutional protection. Hymn notation ledgers that appeared as pious record-keeping to casual observation doubled as coordination maps readable only by those possessing appropriate training, their musical arrangements containing embedded instructions that flowed through channels the ecclesiarchy required to remain open for pastoral communication. An ecclesiarchy scribe, face grey with sleeplessness, admits in deposition that she copied marginal figures because the canoness needed counts to meet quotas, never questioning why feeding rosters referenced the 7th line of hymn 847 for release authorization. She was not corrupt but compliant, trained to process stamped edicts without verification, while efficiency mandates prevented detailed examination. Junior Canoness Aeliana's testimony exemplifies institutional vulnerability rather than individual moral failure. Administrative protocols required stamped edicts to receive approval within specified time frames, creating pressure to maintain throughput that discouraged examination of authorization chains disappearing into ministorum classifications beyond her clearance level. Administratum efficiency mandates demanding increased productivity from reduced staffing created conditions where exhausted minds became vulnerable to alternative arrangements. Night meetings authorized as accommodation for conflicting shift schedules, enabling recruitment activities under official sanction. Authority hypocrisy crystallizes through accumulated testimony, revealing how measures sold as devotion inoculation actually functioned as infection vectors. An Arbite's precinct captain, voice flat, recounts being barred from shrine kitchens during the sweep due to ministorum privilege requiring clerical assent for entry. The incense crates were overweight by 3 kilograms each, but could not be opened without breach reports to the cardinal's office. Meanwhile, ecclesiarchy scribes admit rubber stamp approvals to meet processing quotas, their workload preventing detailed examination of documents whose authorization chains suggested coordination beyond local capabilities. The 3-dot stamp's evolution from vendor identification mark to cult sigil demonstrates how legitimate systems become heretical infrastructure through gradual subversion rather than dramatic infiltration. Quality control markings that indicated proper inspection gradually transformed into coordination signals as awakened participants learned to recognize and reproduce the patterns, their triangular arrangement encoding operational information readable by network members while appearing routine to oversight focused on production metrics. The transformation occurred through accumulated small changes invisible to individual observation but systematic when viewed across extended timeframes. Our 3 citizens' fates diverge through this institutional analysis. Marta vanished during initial cordon operations, her enhanced abilities allowing movement through security perimeters designed for baseline human capabilities, while scarification networks provided safe houses among awakened believers. Jorik died resisting arrest at Dock Spur 9, his enhanced strength insufficient against overlapping rifle fire, yet his death eliminated a witness whose knowledge of smuggling operations threatened to expose broader institutional complicity. Kellen's clerical immunity delayed processing, providing operational advantages that surviving cell members exploited for evidence destruction and network communication through his administrative access. With major arteries severed through purge operations, surviving cells demonstrate adaptation capabilities transcending conventional security assumptions about organizational resilience. Network life continues through capillary systems using maintenance tunnels and abandoned sectors where surveillance equipment fails due to environmental conditions. Coded hymns evolve into sophisticated encryption resistant to administrative analysis, while kitchen whispers shift to portable operations, leaving minimal traces. Psychic communion emerges as primary coordination method among awakened survivors, their enhanced abilities providing communication advantages. Traditional surveillance cannot monitor. Administrative reform proposals focus on increased paperwork requirements and additional approval layers rather than addressing fundamental contradictions between efficiency mandates and security oversight. Lay Brother Logistics faces restructuring, maintaining charitable programs while adding verification procedures, yet new protocols operate within the same jurisdictional framework, enabling original exploitation. Enhanced surveillance equipment receives funding, while training programs continue emphasizing processing speed over analytical depth, suggesting reforms addressing symptoms while avoiding systemic contradictions. The missing xenolith creates ongoing security concerns as Auspex readings spike throughout maintenance systems before environmental interference renders equipment unreliable, suggesting mobile focal point for manifestations appearing anywhere within extensive infrastructure networks. Investigation reveals institutional design flaws enabling systematic exploitation rather than individual corruption, yet reform efforts focus on scapegoating junior personnel rather than addressing structural vulnerabilities. Senior administrators claim ignorance while junior clerks face detention for following established procedures, blame flowing downward through hierarchies designed to protect authority rather than acknowledge systemic failure. Machine spirits process detention forms while data networks whisper associations between administrative anomalies, but institutional blind spots prevent comprehensive analysis of patterns, suggesting coordination beyond local capabilities. The system that created heretical growth through accumulated contradictions continues operating according to established protocols, setting stage for future exploitation by networks that learned adaptation through survival. The hidden hand remains concealed within bureaucratic architecture designed to protect authority rather than acknowledge vulnerability, ensuring cycles will repeat until fundamental contradictions receive resolution through reform or collapse. 2 years after the Purge's cleansing fire swept through Hive Tertius, the administrative reports declare victory, while deeper currents reveal evolution shaped by survival pressure and institutional lessons learned through blood and bureaucratic failure. The massive cordon operations eliminated visible heretical infrastructure, yet persistent anomalies suggest network adaptation rather than termination. What emerges from the ashes proves smaller, colder, more disciplined. An organism that learned to thrive in the spaces between imperial attention and administrative oversight. The reformed cells abandon reliance on dramatic focal points like St. Matthias's third hand, instead distributing spiritual authority across mundane objects that trigger no security reviews. Survivors restructure around hard-learned lessons, written in scarred flesh and whispered instruction. Never trust a single relic that can be seized. Never gather in numbers you cannot abandon within a heartbeat. Never speak truths you cannot disown under interrogation. Sanctioned imperial texts serve as encryption foundations, their familiar passages carrying embedded meanings readable only by those possessing appropriate training while maintaining perfect theological orthodoxy to casual examination. HIM 847 evolves into sophisticated temporal cipher, operating through normal devotional activities without triggering security reviews. Third verse, hummed during shift turnovers, signals authorized meetings in maintenance corridors where machine oil drowns conversation and servo skull acoustics fail. Fifth stanza indicates message drops beneath icon plaques where dust collects faster than audits reach. Seventh verse triggers abort protocols, hummed once, cut short before the final note, when surveillance pressure exceeds operational thresholds. The notation travels inside hymnals as penance tallies, diagonal strokes across musical bars meaning stand down, to trained eyes while appearing as devotional enthusiasm to oversight focused on attendance rather than content. Kellen survives administrative review by becoming exactly what the hive requires, a clerk who never loses a form, whose ledgers balance to the last digit while certain pallets route through maintenance spurs that no longer exist on official diagrams. His enhanced perception, that metallic ripple in reflected light, allows precise timing for network activities, while his scarification networks provide secure communication through channels traditional surveillance cannot penetrate. He files immaculate minutes for lay brother logistics restructuring committees while ensuring audit flags drag by 30 hours through keystrokes that appear as system lag. His desk sits at the confluence of reforms that do not reform, processing new permissions that still exempt shrine kitchens from search without ecclesiastic assent. Marta's fate remains officially unknown despite systematic searches, yet operational patterns suggest coordination beyond individual capability. During curfew hours, maintenance workers report a woman's breath riding the ventilation systems, syllables clipping in third verse patterns that warn of patrol routes and inspection schedules. Her whispers that carry further than physics allows create persistent security concerns as silver threads of connection flow through awakened minds scattered throughout the lower sectors, bypassing Vox intercepts and Auspex sweeps entirely. Records list her as missing, while rumors name her otherwise, a ghost in the machine whose presence coordinates cells through psychic communion. Cell structure adopts triple redundant leadership, ensuring operational continuity despite arrest scenarios. Every visible coordinator sits shadowed by two others capable of assuming functions without message, traffic that would flag surveillance algorithms. Prayer request chains mask operational directives as routine spiritual correspondence flowing through channels the ecclesiarchy maintains for pastoral care. A chapel board petition reading, "For Lector Bain's cough, burn 3 candles at 5th rise," translates to divert 3 crates at 5th bell from designated coordinates, the movements following metrics while the language reads like piety to untrained observation. Black market operations pivot from promethium diversion toward biological materials harvested through corrupted disposal protocols that transform riot casualties into ritual components. Ration riots and cordon skirmishes swell the charnel streams while mortuary servitors follow Form Mort 19b with systematic modifications. Tissue reclamation routes through unauthorized channels, bone ash diverts to hidden scriptoriums, blood plasma feeds enhancement production rather than medical supplies. A charnel guildsman with lay brother credentials can misroute processing carts for 10 minutes and skim sufficient materials to supply weeks of enhanced rituals. The candles burn longer now, their flames edged with thin blue light while ink dries darker, binding better to vellum as suffering becomes literal currency in ledgers kept over tagged remains. The quiet blessing transforms from simple recognition gesture into elaborate scarification patterns encoding cell affiliation and operational clearance through skin memory serving as unbreakable oath. Fresh cuts heal into raised marks arranged in geometric configurations. Short lines, long ridges, crossing patterns set at precise angles that shine when oiled, then fade under grime. The arrangements appear accidental to casual observation, yet carry precise meaning about verse counts and security clearances to trained recognition. Arbites photograph hands and build classification charts, but patterns function as languages, and languages can mask dialects under surface sameness. When raids produce 9 arrests against algorithmic expectations of 26, the missing flow into maintenance ducts' fifth stanzas tremble through floor vibrations. Investigation teams note persistent rumors regarding voices in the ventilation systems, teaching new HIM codes to maintenance workers whose infrastructure access enables coordination beyond surface surveillance capabilities. Audio equipment captures harmonics that map like speech but refuse transcription, while heat signatures trace to abandoned air handler chambers containing chalk measures on floors, scorch patterns on steel, and circles of candle stubs that burn steady against drafts. The few investigators who listen too long bleed from the nose and temporarily misplace their children's names, instruction extracted at prices measured in sleep, warmth, and memories previously thought secure. Kellen processes the new waste audits that count promethium to the milliliter while ignoring plasma draw. Irregularities at mortuaria, his enhanced perception revealing for Mort 19B's new subline for temporary diversion, pastoral, that he signs twice weekly, with hands that tremble only in reflection's edges. The voices extract payment through methods creating biological and psychological changes that enhance recipient capabilities, while binding them through experiences transcending normal consciousness, their instruction transforming routine maintenance into recruitment opportunities while providing guidance enabling network evolution beyond Imperial detection thresholds. Arbites achieve arrests, but numbers consistently misalign with intelligence estimates, the reformed networks proving smaller yet demonstrating coordination, suggesting hidden guidance beyond local capabilities. Discipline replaces enthusiasm as survival mechanism, while enhanced abilities provide tactical advantages traditional security measures cannot counter. The system announces closure while hymns answer with rests before the next bar. Adaptation continuing within infrastructure designed to serve rather than conceal such activities. Somewhere in the ductwork, teachers with no faces price every lesson in hours of consciousness and fragments of identity, preparing networks for evolution the Imperium cannot recognize or contain. The patterns emerging from Hive Tertius investigation demand broader analysis as administrative clerks process similar anomalies across 17 sectors, their reports revealing not isolated heretical outbreak but systematic vulnerability embedded within Imperial governance itself. What appears as individual administrative failure scales into institutional architecture that produces heretical networks with mechanical predictability, the Imperium's own logic creating conditions that desperate populations exploit through arrangements orthodox doctrine cannot contain or control. Forge vassal worlds report maintenance litanies drifting toward dark mechanicum practice through gradual theological revision, similar to the textual alterations that enabled Tertius's network growth. Machine spirits receive prayers emphasizing hidden function rather than blessed operation, while tech adepts discover enhancement protocols buried within sanctioned repair manuals. The same 3-dot markings appear on newly forged components, quality control stamps transformed into coordination signals as production quotas increase while safety metrics decline. Enhanced machinery operates through principles Imperial doctrine categorically denies while maintaining surface compliance with Adeptus Mechanicus protocols. Agri-worlds facing drought cycles witness penance rituals evolving into blood fertility rites that promise immediate results rather than patient endurance of divine will. where populations starve under tithe burdens and environmental collapse, the ecclesiarchy's demands for more prayer and fasting push citizens beyond breaking points. When rains still refuse to fall, desperate farmers turn to more visceral appeals, blood offered to parched earth as tangible sacrifice for immediate return. Harvest festivals incorporate scarification ceremonies where suffering becomes currency, purchasing favorable weather through intermediary powers more responsive than distant imperial saints. Void port installations develop cargo hymns hiding contraband within legitimate shipping manifests, their harmonic arrangements serving as encryption keys for smuggling operations that exploit inspection immunity during religious processions. The same jurisdictional complications that plagued Tertius create porous borders where enforcers defer to ecclesiarchy port chaplains regarding blessed cargo contents, allowing forbidden materials passage through channels protected by ministorum privilege. Loading dock supervisors coordinate enhanced material distribution using infrastructure access that creates coordination opportunities beyond surface surveillance capabilities. Common denominators crystallize through accumulated analysis, revealing imperial doctrine's structural vulnerabilities rather than individual moral failures. Centralized piety creates predictable exploitation vectors, as bureaucratic faith management generates the very conditions heretical networks require for growth. Scarcity combined with exhaustion enables desperate bargains where suffering as currency appeals to populations whose material conditions make alternative spiritual arrangements attractive regardless of theological implications. Institutional privileges designed to protect religious activities create exploitation corridors that networks utilize with systematic precision while maintaining perfect operational security. Efficiency mandates proliferate across sectors through administrative best practices prioritizing processing speed over analytical depth, creating identical vulnerability patterns wherever imperial governance encounters resource limitations and population pressure. The same authorization chains disappearing into classifications beyond local clearance appear throughout subsector administration, while junior personnel follow established procedures without verification under productivity pressures, preventing detailed examination. Reform proposals focus on additional paperwork requirements rather than addressing fundamental contradictions between efficiency mandates and security oversight. Institutional conflicts emerge as jurisdictional complications impede investigation while organizations protect authority rather than acknowledge systemic failure. Ministorum officials blame administratum efficiency mandates for creating oversight gaps, while administratum representatives cite ecclesiarchy theological authority as justification for avoiding scrutiny of devotional practices. Arbeits investigators navigate political complications that delay response, while local enforcers lack training recognizing doctrinal deviation disguised as exceptional piety. Inquisitors disagree on acceptable torch levels for addressing contamination without destroying imperial infrastructure, their debates paralyzing response, while networks adapt through survival pressure. The systemic truth emerges through accumulated evidence, transforming individual cases into pattern recognition. Chaos, cult growth represents system output rather than external infiltration. The Imperium uses faith to manage scarcity through transactional piety, creating spiritual markets where alternative currencies become attractive to populations whose material conditions orthodox doctrine addresses inadequately. Every efficiency mandate generates blind spots. Every resource limitation creates desperation. Every institutional privilege enables exploitation by networks understanding bureaucratic architecture better than officials operating within it. Scale escalation reveals St. Matthias's third hand as one component in distribution networks spanning multiple sectors. Dozens of xenoliths moving through shrine networks using legitimate religious infrastructure while maintaining perfect regulatory compliance. Hymn-coded logistics spread like accounting best practices through administrative channels designed for pastoral communication, their encryption methods evolving through accumulated experience while remaining invisible to oversight focused on attendance metrics rather than theological precision. The missing xenolith from Hive Tertius represents tactical withdrawal rather than operational termination. If imperial governance cannot not produce heretical networks through accumulated contradictions between doctrine and practice, resource limitations and population pressures, efficiency mandates and security requirements, then survival depends upon individual recognition of exploitation vectors. Citizens must refuse extra rations tied to relics, sleep beyond mandated minimums when possible, question when hymns change words, avoid private veneration arriving with promises, count supply drums, choose confessors, counseling rest over penance. These rules prove nearly impossible under tithe pressures and surveillance, yet represent the only defense against becoming vectors for forces the system inevitably creates. The spiral outward continues through infrastructure designed to serve rather than conceal such activities, while voices in ventilation systems keep teaching enhanced hymn codes at prices measured in sleep, warmth, and memories previously thought secure. Reform without fundamental restructuring ensures cycles will repeat until the Imperium acknowledges what desperate populations already understand. Meaning cannot be rationed indefinitely without creating markets for alternatives that promise what orthodoxy withholds. We return to where understanding began, a manufactorum prayer hall at 0400 Imperial Standard, the same yellow stencil marks worn smooth by countless knees, the same cracked hands clutching prayer beads salvaged from broken servitors. Worker 7741 Kappa kneels in position unchanged for 6 years, 2 months, 18 days, her lips moving through the litany of toil, while her eyes hold the vacant distance of someone passing familiar words for meaning beyond industrial quotas. The Voxcaster crackles with mechanical authority, 347 workers responding in measured cadence, yet now we understand what we observe, not simple devotion, but a system under perpetual stress, its spiritual architecture, creating the very vulnerabilities that desperate populations exploit. The dangerous question that began this examination continues echoing through recycled air. Does divine attention reach forgotten places where his servants toil without witness? 2 years after the purge swept these depths, the inquiry persists because the conditions that generated it remain unchanged, embedded within imperial governance itself rather than individual moral failure. Against this backdrop, the only honest offering is procedure rather than promise. Sleep beyond mandated minimums when circumstances allow, recognizing that exhaustion creates mental states where orthodox doctrine's transactional nature becomes unbearable. Question extra rations tied to devotional activities, understanding that spiritual rewards requiring material payment suggest alternative arrangements, seeking currencies desperate populations possess, suffering, secrecy, blood. Note when hymns change words during routine recitation, as single-syllable alterations accumulate into doctrinal drift invisible to casual observation, but systematic when viewed across extended timeframes. Avoid private relic veneration arriving with promises of immediate benefit rather than patient endurance. Trust no hand signs learned as adult that claim ancient tradition while spreading through geometric progression, suggesting coordinated dissemination. Count the supply drums moving through work areas, noting quality markings that evolve from vendor identification into coordination signals. Choose confessors who counsel rest over additional penance, recognizing that spiritual discipline demanding increased suffering from already burdened populations serves extraction rather than pastoral care. These survival rules prove nearly impossible under tithe pressures and surveillance requirements that prioritize productivity over individual welfare. The system demands choices between meaning and subsistence, While punishing those who seek alternatives through channels, it simultaneously creates and condemns. Compliance with safety protocols conflicts with basic survival needs within architecture designed for extraction rather than protection. The open loops resolve without romance through accumulated understanding of legitimate systems becoming heretical infrastructure. Ration authorizations flowed through proper channels using ministorum imprimatur and administratum efficiency protocols. Corruption was design rather than bribe, institutional logic rather than individual moral failure. Hymn books functioned as coordination systems through musical notation carrying embedded instructions, their encryption hidden within orthodox content requiring ecclesiastical privilege to examine. Three-dot quality markings evolved from vendor identification into cult semaphore through gradual subversion, their triangular arrangements adapting to countermeasures while exploiting new vulnerabilities created by reforms addressing symptoms rather than systemic contradictions. The Xenolith's fate remains unknown despite extensive investigation, perhaps ground into shrine mortar where its influence spreads through construction materials, perhaps seeding new networks through distribution channels operating beyond detection thresholds, perhaps sitting in maintenance voids warm to touch, humming to someone who cannot sleep and now never will. Its continued absence confirms adaptation rather than termination, networks learning survival through pressure, while authorities declare victory over visible symptoms. The cautionary thesis crystallizes through sector-wide analysis. Chaos cults achieve victory not through spectacular confrontation, but by matching needs the Imperium misprices through its own governance structures. Where orthodox faith demands endurance without relief, alternatives promise immediate results. The competition occurs within spiritual markets created by imperial doctrine's transactional nature, heretical arrangements winning through better exchange rates rather than superior theology. Faith endures regardless of institutional arrangements. What changes is who collects the interest on investments populations make seeking meaning beyond survival, divine attention beyond bureaucratic indifference. The final sound echoes through the prayer hall as workers rise toward production stations where another day of measured toil awaits. Someone heading to third shift hums hymn 847 correctly but quietly, the seventh stanza receiving particular attention. Labor without witness sanctifies, words acknowledging divine presence beyond official oversight while maintaining perfect theological orthodoxy. The choice remains constant between meaning and survival, each day bringing small decisions whose accumulated weight determines whether orthodox doctrine provides sufficient comfort or whether desperate minds seek answers through channels the system creates while claiming to prevent. The manufacturum continues its rhythm while questions persist in depths where cracked hands clutch prayer beads and eyes seek something beyond measured imperial compliance, the dangerous inquiry enduring as breath itself.